The moment Tessa Ellis saw Kieran Stryker walk into the boardroom of Ellis Marine Engineering, she knew her life was about to become infinitely more complicated. She had built this company from the ground up over the past 8 years, turning a small boat repair operation into one of the premier marine engineering firms on the East Coast. Her father had died when she was 23, leaving her with nothing but debt and a crumbling warehouse. Now, at 31, she employed 200 people and held contracts with yacht clubs, commercial fishing operations, and luxury boat manufacturers up and down the Atlantic seaboard. But 3 years ago, when the company was struggling through a rough patch, she had made a deal with Vincent Stryker, a shipping magnate with deep pockets and deeper connections. He had invested $20 million in exchange for a board seat and 15% equity. It had saved her company. It had also meant giving up a piece of her independence. Vincent had been a silent partner mostly. He attended quarterly meetings, asked intelligent questions, offered occasional advice, but never interfered with her operations. She had grown comfortable with the arrangement. Then Vincent died of a heart attack 2 weeks ago, and his 32-year-old son inherited everything, including that board seat. Kieran Stryker was not what she expected. The business magazines painted him as a ruthless corporate raider who bought struggling companies, stripped them for parts, and sold what remained. He had a reputation for being cold, calculating, and utterly without sentiment when it came to business. But the man who walked into her boardroom that Tuesday morning did not look like a predator. He was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair that was slightly too long to be conventionally corporate, and wearing a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. His eyes were a striking shade of blue-gray, and when he looked at her, there was an intensity there that made her breath catch for just a moment. She stood, extending her hand. "Mr. Stryker, I am so sorry for your loss." His handshake was firm, warm. "Thank you, and please call me Kieran. My father spoke highly of you and what you have built here." The other board members, all men over 50 who had been with her since the early days, watched this exchange with barely concealed anxiety. They knew what Kieran Stryker was capable of. They were waiting for the other shoe to drop. Tessa gestured to the chair that had been her father's, then Vincent's. "Please sit. We can begin." The meeting proceeded normally at first. She presented the quarterly financials, which were strong. Revenue was up 18% year over year. They had just landed a major contract with a luxury yacht manufacturer that would keep their fabrication team busy for the next 2 years. Employee retention was at an all-time high throughout her presentation. Kieran said nothing. He simply watched, listened, took notes on a leather-bound notepad. His expression was unreadable. When she finished, Marcus Winters, her CFO, cleared his throat. "Mr. Stryker, do you have any questions about the financials?" Kieran set down his pen and looked around the table. "Just one. Why is Tessa doing all of this alone?" The question hung in the air. Tessa frowned. "I am sorry, I do not understand. You presented the financials, the operations report, the strategic planning overview, and the new business development update. That is 4 full-time executive jobs. Why are you doing all of them?" She felt her defenses rising. "Because this is my company. I know every aspect of it inside and out." "I am sure you do, but that is not what I asked." His voice was calm, not accusatory, but there was something in it that demanded an honest answer. She glanced at Marcus, who looked uncomfortable. "We have been discussing adding some executive positions," Marcus said carefully, "but the timing has never been quite right." "The timing has never been quite right because Tessa does not want to give up control," Kieran said bluntly, "which I understand. This is her company, her vision, her hard work, but it is also not sustainable. Tessa felt heat rising in her cheeks. With all due respect, you have been here for exactly 20 minutes. I am not sure you are qualified to make that assessment. You are right, Kieran said simply. I apologize. That was presumptuous. She had been ready for an argument, and his immediate concession caught her off guard. She looked at him more carefully. There was no hint of sarcasm or manipulation in his expression. He genuinely seemed to be acknowledging his overreach. However, he continued, I would like to request something. I would like to spend the next few weeks here learning the business, not as a board member but as an observer. I want to understand what my father invested in, and I want to understand how I can be useful rather than simply occupying a seat at a table. The other board members exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. Board members did not embed themselves in operations. They certainly did not offer to be useful. Tessa studied him, trying to read the angle. There had to be one. Men like Kieran Stryker did not do anything without a strategic purpose, but she could not see it yet, and refusing would make her look defensive and insecure. Fine, she said. You can shadow me, but I run a tight ship and I do not have time to babysit. A slight smile touched his lips. I would not expect you to. Over the next week, Kieran Stryker became her shadow. He arrived at the office every morning at 6:30, exactly when she did. He sat in on her meetings, walked the fabrication floor with her, joined her for lunch with potential clients, and stayed late when she stayed late, which was most nights. And he never once offered unsolicited advice. It was unnerving. She kept waiting for him to start making suggestions, pointing out inefficiencies, questioning her decisions. That was what investors did. That was what men with power and money did. But Kieran simply watched, listened, and occasionally asked clarifying questions that suggested he was paying very close attention. On Thursday afternoon, she was in the fabrication warehouse, reviewing a complex hull repair with her lead engineer, Danny Santos. The yacht belonged to a notoriously demanding client, and the damage was more extensive than the initial assessment had suggested. We are going to have to replace the entire starboard section, Danny was saying, gesturing to the damaged area. That is another week of work, minimum, and probably 30,000 in additional materials. Tessa nodded, running calculations in her head. The client is not going to be happy, but we cannot compromise on safety or quality. Draw up the revised estimate, and I will call him this afternoon. Kieran, who had been standing a few feet away, spoke up. Have you considered offering him a discount on his next service instead of eating the cost on this one? She turned to look at him. He does not have a next service scheduled, but he will. A yacht like this requires regular maintenance. If you can lock him into a service contract now, you guarantee future revenue and keep him happy today. You might even break even on the additional cost. It was a good idea, a smart idea, and it annoyed her that she had not thought of it first. That might work, she admitted grudgingly. Kieran nodded and stepped back, returning to his observer role. Danny grinned at her once Kieran was out of earshot. I like him. He is not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who would come in here and try to tell us all how to do our jobs, but he actually listens. She wanted to argue, but she could not, because Danny was right. That evening, after most of the staff had gone home, she found Kieran in the small office that had been set up for him. He was reading through what looked like every contract the company had signed in the past 3 years. She leaned against the door frame. You do not have to do this, you know. You are a board member, not an analyst. He looked up, and for the first time she saw tiredness in his eyes. I know, but I want to understand. Why? He was quiet for a moment, as if weighing how much to say. My father built his empire through smart investments in people he believed in. He believed in you. I want to understand why, and I want to make sure I honor that. There was something raw in his voice, something that spoke of grief still too fresh. She found herself softening despite her wariness. "He was a good man. I am sorry you lost him." "Thank you." He closed the folder. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why marine engineering? What drew you to this?" She stepped into the office, settling into the chair across from his desk. "My father was a boat mechanic. He loved the water, loved everything about boats. When I was a kid, I spent every summer in his workshop, handing him tools, learning how engines worked. He used to say that boats were like people. They all had their quirks, their personalities, and if you paid attention, they would tell you what they needed. Sounds like he was a good teacher." "He was. When he died, he left me with a lot of debt and a failing business. Everyone told me to sell to cut my losses, but I could not. It felt like giving up on him." She paused. "So I taught myself marine engineering, took out loans I had no business taking out, and somehow made it work." "Not somehow," Kieran said quietly. "You made it work because you are exceptional at what you do." The compliment caught her off guard. She was used to people acknowledging her success, but there was something different in the way he said it. It did not feel like flattery. It felt like recognition. "Well," she said, standing abruptly, "I should get home. 6:30 comes early." "Tessa," he said as she reached the door. She turned back. "Thank you for letting me be here. I know I am an intruder in your world. I appreciate your patience." She did not know what to say to that, so she just nodded and left. Over the weekend. She could not stop thinking about him, which was ridiculous. She had not dated anyone seriously in 3 years. Building a company did not leave much time for romance, and the few relationships she had attempted had crumbled under the weight of her work schedule. She had made peace with that. Her company was her baby, her focus, her life. But Kieran Stryker was starting to crack that certainty. On Monday morning, she arrived at the office to find a large coffee from her favorite shop sitting on her desk. Next to it was a note in neat handwriting. "Noticed you always skip breakfast. Coffee is not a food group." Beneath the note was a bag containing a still warm croissant. She picked up the coffee, took a sip, and hated how much she smiled. He arrived 15 minutes later carrying his own coffee. "Good morning. You do not have to buy me breakfast," she said. "I know. But you were muttering about missing breakfast 3 times last week, so I thought I would solve that problem." He set down his bag. "If it bothers you, I will stop." "It does not bother me," she said, surprising herself. "Thank you. You are welcome." They fell into a routine. He shadowed her, learned the business, and slowly began offering suggestions. But he always framed them as questions or possibilities, never directives. And more often than not, his ideas were good. He suggested they bid on a contract for a marine research institute that she had dismissed as too small. They won the bid, and it led to introductions that opened doors to government contracts. He noticed that their supply chain for specialized materials was inefficient and helped negotiate better terms with vendors, saving the company nearly $200,000 annually. He even spent a day working on the fabrication floor alongside the crew, which earned him respect from people who had been skeptical of him. And somewhere in those weeks, her wariness began to shift into something else entirely. It was the little things. The way he remembered that she hated pointless meetings and always kept them efficient. The way he noticed when she was stressed and would bring her tea without being asked. The way he talked about his father with a mix of admiration and grief that made her want to reach out and comfort him. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, with an intensity that made her heart race. 6 weeks after he had first walked into her boardroom, they were working late on a proposal for a major contract. It was nearly 10 at night, and they were the only ones left in the building. She was poring over specifications, trying to find a way to shave costs without compromising quality. We could use a lighter alloy for the non-structural components, Kieran suggested, leaning over her shoulder to point at the drawings. He was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and woodsy. It would reduce material costs by about 15%. She tried to focus on the words, but his proximity was making that difficult. That could work. We would have to run tests to make sure it meets durability standards. Danny could probably have preliminary results in a few days. She turned her head to respond and realized just how close he was. Their faces were inches apart. His eyes met hers, and for a moment neither of them moved. "Tessa," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made her pulse quicken. "Yes, I need to tell you something." "Okay." He straightened, putting distance between them, and she felt a pang of disappointment. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign that he was working through something difficult. "These past 6 weeks have been some of the best I have had in a long time," he said. "Learning this business, working with you, being part of something that actually builds things instead of just acquiring and liquidating them. It has made me realize how much I have hated what I do." She stood, facing him fully. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I think I have been doing the wrong thing with my life. My father built his fortune by investing in people and helping them succeed. I have spent the last 10 years tearing companies apart. I told myself it was just business, that I was maximizing value, but the truth is I think I was angry at him for always putting work first, for never being around when I was growing up, and I punished everyone else for it." The vulnerability in his words took her breath away. "Kieran. But being here, seeing what you have built, how you care about your people, how you honor your father's memory by doing good work, it has made me want to be better, to do better." She took a step closer to him. "What does that mean?" He looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming. "It means I need to tell you that I have feelings for you, that I have had feelings for you almost since the day we met. But I also know that I am a board member, that there is a power dynamic here, and I will not do anything that makes you uncomfortable or puts you in a difficult position." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "And what if I told you that I have feelings for you too?" Hope flared in his expression. "Do you?" "I have been trying not to," she admitted. "Because you are right, it is complicated, but yes, I do." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cup her face. "Tell me if this is not what you want and I will step back." Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and kissed him. His arms came around her immediately, pulling her close, and the kiss was everything she had been trying not to think about for weeks. It was urgent and tender at the same time, full of all the unspoken tension that had been building between them. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for so long," he murmured against her forehead. "Me too," she admitted. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I do not want this to be complicated for you. If we do this, I want to do it right." "What does right look like?" "It means I am going to resign from the board," she blinked. "What? No, Kieran, you do not have to do that." "Yes, I do. Because I will not be the reason anyone questions your authority or your decisions. This is your company. You have earned every bit of respect you have. I will not be the thing that undermines that. But your father's investment, his seat. The investment stays. The equity stays. But I will appoint a proxy for the board seat, someone with no personal connection to either of us. That way there is no conflict of interest, no appearance of impropriety." His hands tightened on her waist. "I meant what I said earlier. My first move should be getting out of your way, not making things harder for you." She felt something crack open in her chest, something she had been protecting for so long. "You really mean that? Every word?" She kissed him again, slower this time, savoring it. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "So what happens now? Now I take you to dinner. A real dinner, not a working lunch, and we figure out what this looks like. I would like that." They left the office hand in hand, and Tessa felt lighter than she had in years. Over the next few months, they built something real. Kieran made good on his promise, resigning from the board and appointing a well-respected industry veteran as his proxy. He also began restructuring his own business, moving away from hostile acquisitions and focusing instead on investments that built rather than destroyed. He was still wealthy beyond measure, still had that commanding presence that turned heads in every room he entered, but with her, he was just Kieran. The man who brought her coffee in the morning, who listened when she talked about her day, who held her when the stress of running a company became too much, who made her laugh with terrible jokes about boats. They kept their relationship private at first, not because they were ashamed, but because they wanted to build something solid before subjecting it to outside scrutiny. But eventually, word got out, as it always did. Tessa's employees were supportive, especially when they saw that nothing about the way she ran the company had changed. If anything, she seemed happier, more relaxed. 8 months after that first kiss, Kieran showed up at her office on a Friday afternoon with a proposition. "I need you to come with me this weekend," he said without preamble. She looked up from her computer. "Where?" "It is a surprise. I have work to do." "Tessa, when is the last time you took a weekend off?" She thought about it. "I took a Saturday off last month. A Saturday. 1 day." "In a month?" He shook his head. "You are coming with me. Marcus can handle anything that comes up. I already cleared it with him." "You did what?" "I asked your CFO to make sure there were no critical fires that would require your presence this weekend. He assured me that the company would survive 2 days without you, so pack a bag. We are leaving in an hour." She wanted to argue, but the truth was she was exhausted, and the idea of a weekend away with Kieran sounded like heaven. "Fine, but this surprise better be good." "Oh, it will be," he said with a grin. They drove north along the coast, talking and laughing the whole way. He would not tell her where they were going, but as the sun began to set, he pulled off the highway onto a narrow coastal road. 10 minutes later, they arrived at a stunning modern house perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. "What is this?" she asked as they got out of the car. "This," he said, taking her hand, "is ours. Well, potentially ours. I wanted you to see it before I made an offer." She stared at him. "You want to buy a house? Together?" "I want to build a life with you, Tessa. Not in the city where we are both always working, but somewhere we can actually breathe. Somewhere we can have mornings on the deck drinking coffee, evenings watching the sunset. Somewhere that is ours." She looked at the house, then back at him. "Kieran, this is huge. I know. And if it is too much, too fast, we can wait. But I love you, and I have known that for months now. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build something with you that is not about business or money, but about us." Tears pricked her eyes. "I love you too, so much." He kissed her soft and sweet, then led her up to the house. It was perfect, all clean lines and huge windows that framed the ocean. There was a chef's kitchen, a master suite with a fireplace, a deck that wrapped around the entire structure, and a small dock down a winding path where they could keep a boat. "There is something else," Kieran said as they stood on the deck, watching the stars begin to appear. "I have been thinking about what I want to do next professionally, and I think I want to start a foundation. Something focused on helping young entrepreneurs, especially in industries like yours, that require significant capital and technical expertise. I want to be the kind of investor my father was, the kind that actually helps people build their dreams." "That sounds amazing," she said. I was hoping you might want to be involved, not running it," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "I know you have your hands full, but maybe as an advisor or a mentor to some of the people we help. Your story, what you have built, it is exactly the kind of thing that could inspire others." She leaned into him, feeling his arms wrap around her. "I would love that." They stayed at the house all weekend, talking about the future, making love, and simply being together without the demands of work pulling them in different directions. On Sunday evening, as they prepared to drive back, Kieran made the call to put in an offer on the house. The offer was accepted 2 days later. A year after they first met, Kieran proposed. He did it simply, without fanfare, on the deck of their new house as the sun set over the ocean. "I know we have built something incredible already," he said, holding her hands, "but I want to make it official. I want to be your husband, your partner in everything. Will you marry me?" She said yes before he even finished the question. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony on the beach below their house. Her employees came, his business associates came, and the people who mattered most to both of them. It was simple and perfect, just like them. Tessa kept running Ellis Marine Engineering, which continued to grow and thrive. Kieran launched his foundation, which funded dozens of small businesses in its first 2 years, and became known as one of the most founder-friendly investment organizations in the country. They worked hard, but they also made time for each other, for lazy Sunday mornings and spontaneous weekend trips and dinners where they did not talk about work at all. 3 years after they married, Tessa discovered she was pregnant. She had never been sure if she wanted children, too focused on her company to think that far ahead, but the moment she saw the positive test, she knew she wanted this. Wanted it with Kieran, wanted to build a family as solid and strong as everything else they had created together. Their daughter, named Vivian after Kieran's mother and Marie after Tessa's father, was born on a crisp October morning. Kieran cried when he held her for the first time, and Tessa fell in love with him all over again watching him become a father. He was devoted, present in a way his own father had not been. He rearranged his schedule to be home for bedtime, took paternity leave without hesitation, and treated fatherhood with the same intensity and commitment he brought to everything else. 2 years later, they had a son named Henry. And their family was complete. Tessa never stopped running her company, but she did take Kieran's advice and finally hired a chief operating officer and a vice president of business development. It turned out that delegating did not mean losing control. It meant trusting good people to do good work, and it freed her to focus on the parts of the business she loved most, the design and engineering challenges that had drawn her to marine engineering in the first place. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they stood on the deck of their house, watching their children play on the beach below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Kieran had his arm around her waist. "You remember what I said the first day we met?" he asked. "You said a lot of things that day. I asked why you were doing everything alone, and you told me it was because it was your company." She nodded. "I remember. I have been thinking about that a lot lately, about how the strongest things we build are never built alone. Your company is stronger because you let good people help you. The foundation is successful because we work as a team. And our family, this life we have, it works because we chose to build it together." She turned to face him fully, reaching up to touch his face. "You know, when you first walked into that boardroom, I thought you were going to be a nightmare, some arrogant billionaire who wanted to tear apart everything I had built. And instead, you were exactly what I did not know I needed. A partner who respected what I had built enough to get out of my way, but who loved me enough to stand beside me anyway." He kissed her, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that still made her knees weak after all these years. "I love you, Tessa Stryker. I love you too." Below them, Vivian shrieked with laughter as Henry chased her across the sand. The waves crashed against the shore, constant and eternal, and Tessa realized that this, all of this, was more than she had ever dared to dream. She had built a company from nothing, had created something her father would have been proud of. But more than that, she had built a life. A real, full, messy, beautiful life with a man who saw her not as someone to control or diminish, but as someone to stand beside. Kieran's first move had been getting out of her way, recognizing her strength and her capability. But every move after that had been toward her, choosing her, loving her, building something together that neither of them could have created alone. And as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear, Tessa knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, there always were. Businesses to run, children to raise, a life to navigate together. But they would face it all side by side. Two people who had found each other when they least expected it, and had built something that would last. The billionaire who inherited a seat on her board had done exactly what he promised. He had gotten out of her way. And in doing so, he had given her something far more valuable than any business advice or financial investment. He had given her a partner, a love, a future filled with endless possibility. And that, Tessa thought as Kieran pulled her closer and they watched their children play in the fading light, was worth more than all the money in the world. Years continued to unfold with a rhythm that felt both predictable and surprising. Ellis Marine Engineering celebrated its 20th anniversary with Tessa still at the helm, though now supported by an executive team she trusted implicitly. The company had expanded beyond the East Coast, opening facilities in Seattle and Miami, and had become the go-to firm for marine engineering projects that required both innovation and reliability. Kieran's foundation had helped launch over 300 businesses, and he took pride in every success story. He still worked hard, but he had learned the lesson that had eluded his father, that being present for your family was not a luxury but a necessity. He coached Henry's soccer team, attended every one of Vivian's piano recitals, and never missed a family dinner unless it was absolutely unavoidable. Vivian, at 12, had inherited her mother's precision and her father's strategic mind. She spent weekends in Tessa's workshop, learning to weld and fabricate, asking questions about hydrodynamics and material stress. Henry, at 10, was more interested in the business side, already talking about marketing strategies and client relations with a sophistication that made both his parents laugh. On a Saturday morning in early summer, the whole family was on their boat, a custom vessel that Tessa had designed and her team had built. It was sleek and efficient, with enough room for the four of them plus occasional guests, and it had become their favorite way to spend weekends. Kieran was at the helm, Henry beside him learning to navigate. Tessa and Vivian were on the deck, Vivian sketching a design for a new type of stabilizer fin she had been thinking about. "Mom," Vivian said, not looking up from her drawing, "how did you know you wanted to do this?" "Marine engineering, I mean." Tessa considered the question. "I think it chose me as much as I chose it. It was my father's world, and after he died, it felt like the only way to stay connected to him. But then it became mine. I fell in love with the problem solving, the way you could take raw materials and turn them into something functional and beautiful. You think I should do it too? I think you should do whatever makes you excited to wake up in the morning. If that is marine engineering, wonderful. If it is something else, that is wonderful too. You are 12. You have time to figure it out." Vivian nodded, returning to her sketch. I like it though, I like making things. Then keep making things. And if you ever want to work with me officially, my door is always open. That evening, back at the house, Tessa and Kieran sat on the deck after the kids had gone to bed. They did this most nights, a ritual of connection that had kept them close through all the chaos of building careers and raising children. Vivian asked me about marine engineering today, Tessa said. Whether she should pursue it. What did you tell her? That she should do what makes her happy, but I hope she does. Is that selfish? Kieran shook his head. It is human. You have built something extraordinary. Of course you want to share it with your daughter. But you also told her the right thing. She has to choose it for herself. Like I did. Like you did. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? Changing everything about your career, your life. You were successful before in your own way. I was rich, he corrected. That is not the same as successful. Success is this. A family I love, work that matters, a partner who challenges me to be better. I did not have any of that before I met you. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but I am glad I did not have to. I am glad I walked into your boardroom that day. Glad you gave me a chance even though I was an intruder. Glad you let me love you. She lifted her head to kiss him. Best decision I ever made. Second best, he corrected with a grin. The best was building your company in the first place. I just got lucky enough to be part of the rest of the story. More years passed, each one building on the foundation they had created. Ellis Marine Engineering continued to innovate, developing new technologies for sustainable marine transport that caught the attention of environmental groups and governments. Tessa won awards, was featured in business magazines, and was invited to speak at universities. But she always said the same thing. That success was not about doing it alone. It was about building something worth keeping and surrounding yourself with people who believed in the same vision. Kieran's foundation grew as well, becoming a model for ethical investing and founder support. He co-authored a book about business transformation and redemption that became a bestseller. Though he donated all the proceeds to scholarships for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Vivian did choose marine engineering, earning a degree in naval architecture, and joining her mother's company at 23. She brought fresh ideas and a new generation's perspective on sustainability and technology. Tessa found that working with her daughter was one of the great joys of her life, a way to honor her own father's legacy while building a new one. Henry chose a different path, studying social impact and nonprofit management. He joined his father's foundation and brought an energy and idealism that revitalized the organization. Kieran had never been prouder than the day Henry told him he wanted to continue the work of helping people build their dreams. On Tessa and Kieran's 20th wedding anniversary, they returned to the beach where they had been married. The house had been expanded over the years, but the deck where Kieran had proposed remained unchanged. It was their touchstone, the place they came back to whenever they needed to remember what mattered most. They stood there now, older and grayer but still very much in love, watching the sun set just as they had done thousands of times before. 20 years, Tessa said softly. I cannot believe it has been 20 years. Feels like both a lifetime and no time at all, Kieran replied, pulling her close. You remember what you said to me that first day, in the boardroom. I said a lot of things I probably should not have. She laughed. You asked why I was doing everything alone, and I think before I met you, I thought that was the only way. That if I let anyone in, if I shared control or responsibility or my heart, I would lose something essential. And now I know that the only way to really build something lasting is to let the right people in. You taught me that, not just with the business but with everything. You got out of my way when I needed space, but you stood beside me when I needed support, and you loved me through all of it." Kieran turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You know what the truth is? I did not get out of your way because I am some enlightened saint. I did it because I recognized that you were already where you needed to be. My job was never to fix you or save you or make you into something different. It was just to love you exactly as you were and support you in becoming even more yourself." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she did not bother wiping them away. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky. We found each other when we needed it most, and we chose to build something real." He kissed her then, sweet and familiar and still capable of making her heart race. And as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky and the sound of the waves provided a constant rhythm, Tessa felt grateful for every choice that had led her to this moment. The billionaire who had inherited a seat on her board had indeed gotten out of her way. But in doing so, he had also shown her what real partnership looked like. Not someone who took over or diminished, but someone who recognized strength and chose to stand beside it. Someone who understood that love was not about control, but about freedom, support, and the courage to build something together that neither could have created alone. Their children were grown now, building their own lives and legacies. The companies they had built continued to thrive, employing thousands and making a real difference in the world. But standing there on that deck, Tessa knew that none of those accomplishments mattered as much as this: the life she and Kieran had built together, the love that had sustained them through challenges and triumphs, the family they had created, and the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. "Ready to go inside?" Kieran asked as the last light faded from the sky. "In a minute," she said, leaning into him. "I just want to stand here a little longer." So they stood, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built businesses and raised children and created a life that was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. The waves continued their eternal rhythm. The stars began to emerge, and in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The story of the billionaire who inherited a seat on her board and got out of her way was really a love story. Not the kind with dramatic gestures and artificial obstacles, but the kind built on respect, partnership, and the daily choice to show up for each other. It was a story about two people who had found each other when they least expected it, and had built something that would last not just a lifetime, but generations. And as they finally turned to walk inside, hand in hand as they had been for 20 years, Tessa knew with absolute certainty that this was the happily ever after she had not even known to dream of. Not perfect, but real. Not without challenges, but always worth it. A love story for the ages, built one day at a time by two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other, over and over again. The house lights glowed warm and welcoming, a beacon against the darkening sky. And as they stepped inside, closing the door on another perfect day, they were already looking forward to all the days yet to come. Because that was the real gift they had given each other. Not just love for today, but the promise of a future built together, one sunset at a time.